Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Falcons Central Radio Show on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I'm Aaron Freeman, joined by my co-host, Scott Karasik. Today, we're going to be talking about the Atlanta Falcons, as we do every week on this show. We're going to be talking about their Monday night loss to the Green Bay Packers, as well as previewing their Week 15 matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers. To help us talk about the Steelers, we got a guy by the name of Justin Russo.
Hello.
Twitter. His Twitter handle is FlyByNight. That's fly by Knite. Clever pun there, Justin. Justin didn't have the unfortunate pleasure of watching the Falcons Monday night game last night. He caught a few things. Basically, he just told us that every time he flipped to the game, the Packers were in the red zone. And that's pretty much, the main thing that if you were watching the game, you probably would have seen. But we'll talk about that, and we'll also talk about the Falcons, whether or not a moral victory is something that the Falcons can take away from this game. But Scott, as we always do, we'll talk about the positives first. And I think the biggest positive that anybody could take away if they saw that game was Julio Jones is pretty good.
Second best wide receiver in the league. When everything's hitting and he's on the field, the only guy that I think is better is Calvin Johnson.
I would agree.
Got the same size, speed, agility, just ridiculousness that is Julio Jones.
Yeah. I don't know if it was this summer or last summer, we had some fantasy guys on the show, and we talked about whether Julio Jones could be on that Calvin Johnson level. And I think, after the last two games where he destroyed Patrick Peterson last week and then basically ripped Sam Shields a new one to the point that I think Sam Shields had wished he never came back from that concussion this past week. I think, Julio Jones has proven that he has the ability to be an absolute dominant receiver. If anybody had any doubts about that, I think he's erased those doubts. And, I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do this week against the Steelers, because that Steelers secondary is pretty bad. I guess the only thing that's going to stop Julio Jones is if this hip injury that he suffered at the end of last night's game is serious, but it doesn't sound like it is.
It sounds like he had a bruise that, had they had time to rewrap it, they would have been able to do. Like, say he got it before halftime. They would have just rewrapped it, put an extra pad in there at halftime, and thrown him back out there.
Yeah. I think the team doctors are being cautious with Julio, given how valuable he is to the team. And, it's one of those situations where they can't really afford to risk, because basically last year he injured his foot, came back into the game, and then, I guess I wouldn't say re-injured it, but certainly aggravated the injury, and that cost him the season. So I think the Falcons will always be very cautious with Julio.
Well, it's just a time thing, really, because I think that his bruise was fine. He just didn't have the time to go and get it rewrapped.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
Left when he suffered it, it takes like 5-10 minutes to do it. By the time he'd gone in the locker room, gotten it rewrapped, and come back out, they would have already the game would have already been over.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I really think it was.
Okay. I won't disagree with that. You're probably right. What do I know?
I was talking with Dave Seabird about it. That's why I was asking. Dr. Dave.
So, Scott, another positive from last night's game, offensive line play. I was a little nervous about what Julius Peppers would do, what Clay Matthews would do, but both guys were pretty quiet last night. Matt Ryan had plenty of time to find Julio Jones.
Outside of the one play that Matt Ryan got sacked, Jake held up pretty well. Like, Jake had maybe that one play and then maybe another one where he allowed a hurry. But I don't even think they credited I don't even think Pro Football Focus credited Matthews with even a hurry on that play, because they said he allowed no sacks, no hits, and one hurry all game long. Basically, Matthews looked like the guy that we all thought he was when he was drafted, and he's looked like that since the bye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
I would say, we both agreed that, his struggles in the middle of the season had more to do with injury than him not being a good player, and it's nice to see that he's proven both of us right. So.
And then Asamoah and Blaylock they've just been rock solid throughout the entire year.
Mm-hmm.
And then my new boy, Ryan Schrader, who athletically I've been pumping up because I was like, this guy's just a beast. This guy's just an athletic monster that once he figures out technique, he'll be good. Well, I mean, you've got the Don of offensive lineman, Mike Tice, helping your guy out. It doesn't hurt.
Yep.
He's turned in 3 best games against excellent pass rushers.
Yeah, I agree. So, Matt Ryan got a lot of criticism last night for that interception he threw. I certainly think, there's a fair degree of criticism, even though I think that was a case of him expecting Devin Hester to make a play, and Devin Hester didn't make the play. But, you can certainly say that Matt Ryan shouldn't have thrown the ball. It's fair. But after that, Matt Ryan was pretty good.
I thought it was the ball slipping out of his hand a little bit early on the throw, that he hadn't completely gotten his cold weather. Like, you know how sometimes quarterbacks take a couple minutes to get into that rhythm when they're in cold weather? I thought that's what it was, because he looked like he was trying to throw the ball out of bounds and go over Hester's head, not like he was trying to throw it to Hester. Because he even dropped back and just kind of lofted it, and then it died at the end. So I think that's really what happened on that play. It wasn't like, at least it wasn't as bad as the Detroit Lions Detroit Lions game, where he just kind of threw it into a zone and no one was there.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. But yeah, I think after that, Matt Ryan's never going to be perfect in any game. Even in his best games, he's never perfect. And there's always one or two plays that you definitely could wish he had back. But I think outside of that one play, I think he was great last night. So, some of the criticism I think is a little overrated. But that's always the case when you're a quarterback. You get blamed a little bit more than you probably deserve. So.
Yeah, because you take out that one play, and you take out that one play, and maybe they don't get that Mason Crosby field goal that it led to.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever, I'm not too worried about it. The running game looked solid last night too, just enough to show the balance for the team, just enough to be like, oh hey, we've got running backs. You might want to actually, at least look at them and expect a run every now and again.
Yeah, it was unfortunate because the Falcons got in a big hole early, so that pretty much took their running game out of it. So they, but when they were running the ball, they were pretty effective with it. So, if defense had held up a little bit better, then I think the running game really could have had a bigger impact on the outcome of the game in a positive way.
My view is they still ran 22 running plays, which to me says that the plan going in was to run the ball. They just weren't able to get the ball first and execute it that way. And I'm okay with that. I think against the Steelers, that's going to be something they should at least try. Just because Steelers' run defense is not amazing, but
worst Steelers defense I've seen in at least 12 years.
Oh, trust me, Cortez has complained to me quite a bit about it, and I'm like, well, you're part of it, dude.
It's bad. There's not like I'm trying to think of like a way to put it, like because injuries have happened, like Ryan Shazier's missed time, Jarvis Jones has missed time, but it's like injuries happen. You got to work your way around them, and the guys that have come in, they're all right. Like Arthur Mote's actually been good. That's the most random guy who ever performed well was Arthur Mote's.
He did
But it's
well
like,
in Buffalo, though.
what happened?
He did well in Buffalo, though.
No, he did, but it was so random because it's like Arthur Mote was just brought in as a guy just to be a situational pass rusher whenever he got snaps. And then Jarvis Jones gets injured, so Arthur Mote gets thrown in there for more. It's like, oh, Arthur Mote is playing well. I mean, the front seven can't really stop the run unless it's obvious running situations. So if the Falcons can stay out of consistent running situations, for instance, if it's like 2nd and 3, if they throw in a play action, if they throw in anything other than a designed run, they should be okay. Because the Steelers bite on a lot of stuff. The Steelers linebackers bite on a lot of play action.
You know what that sounds like, Aaron? It sounds like the Falcons linebackers. And your favorite player, Robert McClain.
Okay.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I like Bobby Mack. I like him as a special teams player. I like him as a dime corner. Sometimes as a nickel corner when it's like a bigger nickel like a Marcus Colston. But outside of Robert McClain last night, I thought the secondary did pretty well. Like, I know you were kind of railing in on Kamal Ishmael for allowing that deep pass. But let's be fair. Jordy Nelson has done that to Darrelle Revis and, people who are pretty damn awesome. And taking out that one play, he played a pretty clean game. Taking out that 60-yard play, he allowed 4 of 6 for 40 yards. Or for 48 yards. I mean, and for a safety, you're going to allow basically 12-yard passes because that's where you're playing. And then you have that pass deflection.
I would, to a certain extent, Scott, that's a fair point that you're making. I think my issue with Kamal Ishmael, I don't think that play was due to Jordy Nelson. It was just, it's just Jordy Nelson being Jordy Nelson. I think had that been Philly Brown, because I think Ishmael's technique was poor on that particular play. It could have been any receiver, and he would have gotten beat on that play. And I think from a technique standpoint, like that's understandable. He's a young player. He's not going to have great technique. He's still developing there. But part of the problem with Ishmael is this is now the second time he's given up a 60-yard touchdown. And had Flacco hit Steve Smith in that Ravens game, it would have been his third. And to me, you continually see on these issues, he's struggling not just from a technical standpoint, but from a physical standpoint in terms of his speed. Like Jordy Nelson blew right by him, and it's not as if Jordy Nelson is the. I just think it's not to sit here and say that Kamal Ishmael is terrible or anything like that. It's just you can't have a safety in that position giving up these plays like he's regularly done this season. And
No, he's only given up 2 of them.
Yeah, but I'm saying that's okay. All right, I guess.
I mean, I understand he's not going to be perfect because, again, no player is perfect, and he's a 7th-round, second-year player. So, I mean, he's not going to be perfect, just like Paul Warlow's not going to be perfect. And, yeah, Paul Warlow didn't have his best game yesterday. Neither did any of the other 2 linebackers. But you're putting 1 or maybe 1.5 linebackers out there and expecting them to do the job of 3 guys. It's not going to happen. It's not. The reason why I was excited about William Moore coming back is William Moore is basically a linebacker at this point in his career. As much as you love the idea of William Moore, the deep safety, he's not a deep safety. He never really has been a deep safety. And
I would disagree, but okay.
He never really has been. He's been like a cover deep, maybe keep deep cover 2 at best, but that's about it. I will say my favorite part about the game, though, is they fought the entire second half, despite being down like 35 points. They just said, screw it, let's shock the world and win this game. That, to me, says more about the players, the coaching, than anything else this season. It says that at least I'm not the biggest Mike Smith fan, but for them to play the way that they did that second half and even be within 7 points by the end of the game, that was huge. Like, that, to me, says they can go in and beat the Steelers. They can go in and beat the Saints, especially with how crappy the Saints have been the past 5 weeks. And they can go in and beat they should probably beat Carolina with a banged-up Cam Newton. If you haven't heard yet, Cam Newton got into a car accident. He broke 2 bones in his back. I fully expect him to get thrown on injured reserve, but knowing Carolina, they're probably not going to do that. They're going to hope that they can win this week. And then if they lose, then they'll throw him on injured reserve. But yeah, it was a nice moral victory for the Falcons. So yes, linebacker play, it was pretty bad yesterday. Not going to lie. Bad angles. Coverage was poor. You know, Warlow had that one pass deflection, which was probably the best play I've ever seen him have in coverage. But other than that, he had a couple average plays and then a couple of bad plays. Just like the rest of the linebackers. A couple average plays, a couple bad plays. Nothing that said, oh my God, we've got our future, 10-year green dot on the roster. I've been championing Warlow as that guy, but he still hasn't improved to the point where he needs to be. He's that second guy. Maybe you keep the green dot on him because he knows the defense, but you need a true coverage linebacker to pair with him. I would love Shaq Thompson from Washington for that role because he's everything I feel like Spoon was supposed to be. So yeah, that should tell you a little bit about that. The pass rush. Corey Bierman was in the backfield all day, but because it's Corey Bierman, he missed 3 tackles.
Yep.
I hate Corey Bierman.
You have to solve it.
I should rephrase that. I hate the way Corey Bierman plays. That he puts off this Hollywood image with his god-awful mistake of a wife. And that he just has no business being out there as many snaps as he is. The entire first drive for the Green Bay Packers was keyed on Corey Bierman. Literally every play. Let's see. Oh, 71's to the left. 71's to the left. That's where we're going. 71's to the left. Hut, run it to the left. Oh, look, he's on the right side now. Yep, run it to the right. Oh, look, he's on the left side again. Let's run it to the left. If you go back and watch that first drive, every single run was right at Bierman. Every single one of them. I'm shocked that when Pro Football Focus came out this morning with grades, he didn't have a -2 for every single play. Because he just looked awful that first drive to the point where that is him in a microcosm for the season. They need to take him out. They need to stop playing Jonathan Babineau at defensive end too. I don't understand why they're playing 3 defensive tackles out there every play.
Okay.
So, put out Goodman. Put out Jonathan Massaquoi. Rotate in Bierman. He's not completely useless, but he's like a 20 snap a game guy, not a 80 snap a game guy. Use Bierman and OC as the reserve pass rushers. That's what you do. When they're fresh and they're attacking, they can actually do something decent. But other than that, don't waste your time with them.
Okay.
They trust the young guys in the linebacking core. They trust the young guys in the secondary. Why can't they just trust the young guys in the friggin' front line? Ugh. And because of that, the third down defense looked like crap. Allowed
Yeah.
7 of 12, including a 3rd and 8, a 3rd and 12, a 3rd and 17, and a 3rd and 20. On a play on that 3rd and 20 that, again, I know you're not the biggest Kamal Ishmael fan, but the hit he delivered on any receiver not named Randall Cobb probably results in an incomplete pass. Because he destroyed Randall Cobb. He almost damn near decapitated him. That was a hit.
Mm-hmm.
And with how much you love Willie Moe, I'm surprised you don't like Kamal Ishmael as much, because he's been delivering hits like that all year.
I don't dislike Kamal Ishmael. I just think he's overrated. That's all I'll say. I like the way he plays. I like his physical style of play, but I think people overrate his ability.
I'm not saying that he's the long-term starter by any means, but for what he's doing right now, I think he's a good fit. I think if you keep him in that third safety role long-term, he's a good fit. As long as you keep him underneath and use him where he wins, he's a good fit. And the run defense was another thing that kind of aggravated me this past week. But again, that goes back to linebacker play and them running right at Troy Bierman every single play.
Nobody could tackle Eddie Lacy or James Starks.
Oh, yeah, tackling was a pain in the butt. I didn't understand why. The only thing I don't understand about the tackling this past week is, could it have been that it was freezing ass cold and tackles hurt just that much more when you're in the cold?
Well, I would say that's plausible, but considering the Falcons' tackling hasn't been great throughout the year, even in the dome, it's probably just because they're just not great at tackling.
Well, no, I mean, they've throughout the season, they've only had one other effort where they had double-digit missed tackles. Or sorry, maybe two other efforts where they had double-digit missed tackles, and it was the Lions, and it was the Bears game. Or sorry, not the Bears, the Browns game. So, I mean, I feel like the issue isn't, yeah, there were bad angles, but as far as like actually hitting the guy and bringing him down, I feel like those two games and then yesterday were the worst games.
Okay.
And yeah, the Bears game was in the dome and the Browns game was in the dome, but could it just be physical? Even in those two games, it was 10 and 11 missed tackles, not 17.
Okay. Yeah, the cold probably contributed, made it worse, but I wouldn't blame the cold for all of it.
Well, I mean, I still think they're going to have double-digit this week, now that we're actually at the section of the show where we're going to talk about the Steelers.
Yeah.
I understand they cut LeGarrette Blount, who has always been a bit of a Falcon killer when he was with the Bucs, so I'm kind of glad he's gone. Not saying Le'Veon Bell's any worse. Le'Veon Bell is way better, but
It's okay.
Le'Veon Bell's not the guy who's going to jump over a Falcon, run into a Falcon, decapitate that Falcon, run another 8 yards, decapitate another Falcon, run another 8 yards, decapitate another Falcon, and then make his way into the end zone. I love Le'Veon Bell. I don't think he's that kind of running back. He's not the violent kind of running back like that.
No.
No.
He's 50. It's weird. Comparing him last year to this year, it's night and day. His vision's improved. He cut down on his weight so much, and it made a difference. His ability now to, like last year, some of the runs he's having this year, if he had last year's weight, he wouldn't be having them.
He reminds me kind of a young Marshall Faulk.
I tried to think about it the other day, and I couldn't remember. Like, I couldn't pin exactly who he reminded me of. He because now he has like the franchise record for receptions for a running back out of the backfield for the Steelers this year. He has like 71 or something. And it's like, so he's kind of Marshall Faulk in that way, but he's almost like a Matt Forte in a way.
That's the comparison I would make.
Yeah, like he's not the biggest, he's not the strongest, he's not the fastest, but he gets to corners better than you thought he could. And it's sneaky. He's really, like, he's won me over. Last year I really didn't like him. I didn't like that we picked him over Eddie Lacy. I really wanted Lacy bad, but I can't hate him now. He's producing. He's a focal point. Without him this year, we're not where we are. Yeah, we've had bad losses, horrible losses, in fact, but like that Buccaneers game is inexcusable. I don't even want to talk about that game. But
well, I was talking like 1998 Marshall Faulk, where he had 1,300 yards rushing on 320 something carries, and then 900 yards receiving on 80 catches, 85 catches.
That could be where he's at this year. I mean, well, he's gonna eclipse the rushing yards, but
yeah.
I feel like as the season's gone along, Todd Haley's made a consistent effort to actually get him involved more. Like, even if he's not running the ball well and the line's not running blocking for him as well as it was, Todd Haley's still finding ways to get him the ball in space or to get him the ball on the edge or just get him involved. And I think actually letting LeGarrette Blount go elevated Le'Veon Bell's role and his game because he realized, I don't have someone backing me up who is going to be there if I fall. Like, this is all on me. And I think he's taken it, and I think he's run with it literally and figuratively. And it's pretty cool to actually see. We haven't had a running back like that since, I'm trying to think, because Jerome Bettis wasn't a pass catcher at the backfield. So,
what about Fast Willie Parker?
I love him. Longest run in Super Bowl history by 1 yard. So Marcus Allen's probably somewhere pissed about that. But I'm trying to think, like, he's almost Rashard Mendenhall, but obviously way better than Mendenhall was. And so I guess I'd say way better version than Mendenhall is how I'd probably just put it, as way better version of Mendenhall.
I like that comparison. I like the Forte comparison because I think Forte was another guy when he was at Tulane. He was a bigger bruiser sort of guy, then lost some weight to try to get faster for the combine and for his pro day, and turned into less of a bruiser and more of a quick guy. But I do think Bell is better than Forte is. Mendenhall is another interesting comparison because he wasn't this complete running back, but then in his, I think it was his second year, you saw a significant improvement from his game because he kind of rounded out the edges. Problem with Mendenhall, he didn't get any better from that point on.
No.
But it's interesting.
I'll still never forgive him for that fumble in the Super Bowl. Still never going to forgive him for that fumble. Although I do respect that he retired when he did. I love how he did that. I like the fact that he didn't feel he was in it anymore, and he just didn't want to take someone else's spot. And he wanted a career after, and I really do respect that because some guys, I respect the guys who want to stay around too, but it said a lot about Mendenhall that he wanted to do other stuff as well. He didn't want football to define who he was. But that fumble, man. Oh, man. That's another thing I don't want to talk about.
I don't blame you, man.
Yeah, I'm not going to bring up old Super Bowl memories because it's not like the Falcons have exactly the best.
Yeah, Tim Dwight, though. Tim Dwight. There you go.
Yeah, Tim Dwight had that great return in the Super Bowl, and then he's part of the Vic trade, and he's got some notoriety, but for the rest of it, not really. I would have been happier looking back on it getting Drew Brees and Danny and Tomlinson.
I think a lot of people would have done that. They would really want that.
Because the Drew Brees, that's a Hall of Famer, a potential Hall of Famer in Brees.
The Brees thing is interesting just because of where he got picked, and then Rivers got picked a couple years later, and then they just let him go because of the shoulder. And it's like his reclamation project in New Orleans was so not random, but it was just so out of the blue. Like what Sean Payton was able to do with him.
Yeah. Little known fact: Drew Brees was almost traded to the Falcons for a third-round pick in 2004.
Was he really?
Yeah, but the negotiations fell apart, and the Falcons ended up drafting Matt Schaub instead, and obviously the rest is history.
Hey, at least you still got something for him, though.
How amazing would it have been had Vic gone down and then Breeze been the reclamation story in Atlanta? That would have been an interesting. Just throwing that out there, that would have been a pretty interesting thing to see.
Yeah, that's a big what if. What would have happened? If that
Oh, yeah.
would've
So many dominoes.
It's like
one-
the. Have you ever
One
seen?
pages the others.
Have you ever seen Damashek's NFL?
No.
It's a very interesting series where he kind of goes over, well, what happens if this team did this, and then 85 chain reaction, butterfly effect things happen, and it winds up with like, oh, the Falcons win the Super Bowl, or the Steelers have a four-peat, and you're just like, dude, quit smoking crack. Or like the 85 Bears lose, so Rob Ryan and Rex Ryan become offensive coordinators. And they end up being like Rob Ryan sucks at it just like he does as a defensive coordinator, and Rex Ryan's is a great one. And I'm just like, Rex Ryan understanding offensive football is the biggest joke I've ever heard.
He's the Mike Brown of football. Mike Brown, the former Cleveland Cavaliers head coach.
Rex is not that bad. Come on now, you can't.
Okay, he's not that bad, but like in terms of like their philosophies.
Okay, I get you.
Like Rex actually gets more out of guys on the defensive side of the ball than he probably should. So, I mean, Mike Brown did the same thing.
Wall's a guy we cast off into a pretty decent corner the last couple of years compared to where he was with the Falcons.
Yeah, the Steelers need a young corner, but we let one of ours go in free agency because who needs those guys?
Steelers and their cornerbacks.
Never like. I think the last good corner we had was Ike Taylor like 6 years ago.
Yeah, 6 years ago is accurate.
Well, you know what? I like Cortez Allen. He's my boy.
Yes,
Let's go with him.
He's shown.
He needs to move to safety.
He's flash potential. It's just, I think the Steelers secondary is just so. Like, I don't even know if there's a word to describe it. Like, it's not like it's just terrible. It's just like there's nothing there. It's Polamalu, and he's injured, and then he's back, and he's got concussions, and then Ike Taylor broke a forearm, and William Gay can't cover. And it's like William Gay hasn't covered anyone in like I think in his entire life. So, and it's become a bigger problem this year. Like in past years, you could hide it because the front seven could get to the quarterback, etc., and so they'd force bad throws, and the secondary could make plays. But they're not a real turnover secondary. They're just there.
I think you need to put Cortez Allen back on the field because athletically, he's probably your best corner.
Athletically, yeah.
So
athletically, yes.
Just put him back on the field and don't put him at left corner.
I'm just in favor of guys going out there, and if they make mistakes, they make mistakes. Like especially younger guys, if they make mistakes, you live with it because they're gonna learn. I mean,
and they just paid him too. They just paid him.
I can't wait till Ike Taylor leaves.
Huh?
I can't wait till Ike Taylor leaves. I really can't, because once he's gone, I think that like this year in the draft, I think we need to go corner first round. But for some reason, I keep playing in my head, we're going to draft an outside linebacker because we're just going to let Jason Worlds go, which is fine, but we're just going to let Jason Worlds go and think we need one. It's just...
If you let Jason Worlds go, tell him to come to Atlanta.
I'll be sure to text him. I'll text him for you.
Because I would love to see Jason Worlds in Atlanta as a pass rusher.
I just don't think he's worth what we're going to pay him. Like what he's making now and what we would eventually pay him, I just don't think he's worth.
See, I think he's going to be one of those let's see, how much does... He's like a 5-year, $25 million kind of guy.
See, that's a good deal. I just don't want to give him what's he making this year? Like 9?
Yeah, you're not. No one's gonna pay him $45 million on the open market.
I hope not. And if it's
No
us,
one's
I might actually cry.
Gonna get like a Tyson Jackson type contract. Only he's gonna actually earn his money, where Tyson Jackson doesn't.
Whereas Tyson Jackson got his just for where he was drafted.
Tyson Jackson, the only reason why he got his is because the guy who drafted him is now in Atlanta sabotaging things so he can try and take Thomas Dimitrov's job.
That's as good an explanation as you're going to get, because that's the only way it makes sense.
That's the only way that contract makes any sense. Because it was like, oh yeah, you should check out this guy Tyson Jackson. I took him with the 3rd overall pick. And I'm sure Dimitrov right now is like, why the hell did I agree to that contract? I just need to cut this guy.
I still remember when he was drafted.
They could cut him, eat an extra $4.1 million in cap room, and then cut Sam Baker and gain it all back. So, and when you've got $30+ million in cap room as it is, that doesn't sound like too bad of a move, honestly.
No,
Make him a post-June cut and not take the hit.
Well, yeah, make him a post-June cut, and then you save money this year and next. You save 2.25 this year, and then you save, 1.5 next year. So I'd be down with that. Put him and Sam Baker on post-June 1st cut, and then save that money for the rookies, and then just spend to the cap from that point on. That's what I would do. Go get Worlds, go get Brandon Graham, draft a guy in the 1st round, throw all of them into a pot with Massaquoi, Mapanga, and Starr, and the top 4 that get out of that battle royale get a shot to start, and then rotate in, and worst case scenario, Worlds is a solid rotational, 1st and 2nd down linebacker.
So, Justin, do you think, and you probably aren't aware of this, but Desmond Trufant has been shadowing #1 receivers the last couple of weeks and done a pretty good job of it.
I actually was aware of that.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Do you think he can be the one corner in this National Football League that can contain Antonio Brown?
Define contain.
Keep him under 75 yards.
See, the way that I look at it is, with the way that the Steelers' offense has gone lately, with Martavis Bryant back over the last, 9 weeks or something since he came back, the Steelers have used the vertical passing threat with him to kind of like be the new Mike Wallace, obviously not up to what Mike Wallace was doing. So it's allowing Brown to have more interactions with the intermediate routes on the digs and the comebacks and all that stuff, whereas it alleviates pressure. So it really does depend on if they ever get lined up on the same side together, Bryant and Brown, because if they're lined up on the same side, it could create a lot of one-on-ones for Trufant against Brown, which could lead to, I look at it as like in every matchup, you win some, you lose some.
Mm-hmm.
I think Trufant could keep him under 75 yards depending on what Martavis Bryant is getting down the field. And Heath Miller or Bell out of the backfield. Like Desmond Trufant is a really good cover corner. I think he could contain him. It all depends on what the other Falcons secondary players are doing with their matchups, though.
That's where I'm hoping Robert Alford is healthy. Because I feel like if anybody could contain Martavis Bryant, it's Alford. I think Trufant matches up well with Brown. I think Alford matches up well with Bryant. Because Alford's a very similar corner to Georgia Tech's DJ White, who was able to contain Martavis Bryant pretty easily when he was at Clemson.
Yeah, Martavis is a very interesting player in that he's only been targeted like 40 times this year, but they're all vertical passes down the seam, down the side. Like he's averaging something like 22 yards of reception I mean, that's ridiculous for a guy. Even like Mike Wallace in his heyday with the Steelers was, I think he was under that. And it's like, so it's like with him in the, I mean, obviously the 94, 95-yard touchdown pass last week, it inflated that number a little bit, but Martavis's ability to, yeah, just a little. Martavis's ability, I mean, he only has like 21 catches, so a 94-yard is going to do something to that. But Martavis's ability to just stretch the field vertically has really opened the door for the offense. So if you can contain Martavis, much like defenses were able to contain Mike Wallace some games, you could limit the Steelers' passing attack on intermediate routes. If one guy covers Bryant, everyone else can hone in on basically Brown and Miller, and then you just shut down the short passing game in the flat.
See, and that's why I like Alford, is because Alford's really good at containing guys who know one route or two routes. Like Martavis Bryant, and I said this when he was coming out of Clemson because I watched a lot of that when I was living in South Carolina. He's nothing but a 9. Like, that's all he is. He's a 9 route or a deep fade or a deep corner or a deep post or whatever. But you know he's going deep. So when Alford can play in that, 5-yard off coverage, he knows there's not going to be that short pass, so he's not going to get beat on that double move.
I equate Martavis Bryant to Forrest Gump. Just run, Forrest, run. That's all he has to do. It's
exactly. And Alford's 4-3-4 kind of guy.
Yeah.
If anybody can keep up with him, it's him. And he's 5'11", so it's not like he's going to get destroyed.
No, it's a good size. Honestly, I think cornerback size is a little overrated in the NFL in terms of height. But
you still got to be like 5'10" to 6 foot.
Ideally, but there's guys in the 5'9", 5'10" range who can still play. I mean, obviously, I'd say Pac-Man Jones, but that was a while ago with Tennessee before he made it rain in clubs. So
who is Wheaton your number 2 now, or is it Justin Brown?
I hope I never see Justin Brown for the rest of my life.
Okay, good.
I mean, I liked Marcus Wheaton. I liked when we drafted him because he is, in a weird way, this is going to sound bad because there's only one Antonio Brown, just like there's one Calvin, there's one Julio Jones, et cetera, et cetera. But he does remind me a little bit of Antonio Brown in that he's a good route runner, obviously not to Brown's level, because Brown just gets open. But I feel he's kind of the same way, almost like he's a strategic route runner, good short to medium guy, but he's not overused. He's got like 70 or something targets, but it's just basically he's used when we need him. He's kind of where Antonio Brown was when Brown came in, more as a third down guy. So that's kind of how they're using him. So I view him as the number 2. I don't think the Steelers have defined who their number 2 is. I think it's just Antonio Brown and whoever the hell else is out there. So I think that's where we're at right now. And I have a train that's about to go by my house, so I apologize for that. I don't know if you could hear that.
Yeah.
We could. Yeah, I mean, so you don't really have a number 2. You've just got a bunch of, like, number 3s that come in and rotate.
Yeah, we have a 1 and like 4 3s. And then Lance Moore.
It's okay. The Falcons have a 1, a 2, and, like, a pair of 4s.
I don't even know of an offense that has, I guess, multiple, and when I say multiple, I mean like more than 3 or more, at least number 2 receivers. I mean, maybe, see, Denver last year could have, but I wouldn't say. Cobb.
Green Bay. I think you got Jordy as a number 1.
Cobb is a 2.
Devontae, Cobb, and what was his name? Devontae and Cobb are both 2s right now. Devontae Adams.
Yeah, I liked him at Fresno State.
3.
Yeah, and part of that equation is how much does Aaron Rodgers make them 2s and 3s? You know, I mean, probably the best quarterback in football.
See, I'm with Aaron on this one about Harry Douglas. Whenever Matt Ryan or whenever Julio Jones or Roddy White are out, and Harry Douglas has this great game, it's 99% of the time just because Matt Ryan has known him for his entire career, played with him for his entire career, and just, Matt knows where Harry's going to be. So he lobs it to the left, and boom, Harry's there to pick it up. He lobs it to the right, boom, Harry's on a drag route. You've got, what is it? You've got Toilolo running a simple corner route or a simple hook route, and then the secondary comes in, and then boom, he does a slip screen off of it. It's not really a pick because Toilolo sits there and actually tries to run the route. He just sucks so bad at running routes that he's a glorified pick guy at this point.
You want to hear an interesting Steelers stat? Antonio Brown has, I think, roughly 150 targets this year. The rest of the Steelers' actual wide receivers, not running backs and tight ends, just receivers, I think they're at about 165 for themselves combined.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, it's basically Antonio Brown and then everyone else. And so, but it's also Bryant, because when Bryant came back, the offense started becoming more of a vertical passing game rather than Haley's dink and dunk, let's just see what the hell happens, someone break a tackle offense. And it changed things. Of course, the Jets game notwithstanding, but, stuff happens. And I think if you can contain Bryant, you contain a lot of what the Steelers want to do. Because it's almost like a basketball team with an up-tempo offense that just wants to create mismatches in transition. If you stop Martavis Bryant from getting open down the field, you contain a lot of what the Steelers want to do offensively.
I can agree with that one. I can completely agree with that one.
And it's because of his speed and even Brown, because you gotta kind of double cover Antonio Brown, so you leave yourself one-on-one against Bryant, which alleviates the pressure in the box, which allows Le'Veon Bell to get off.
So, speaking of Bell, obviously he's a good receiver. Obviously he's a good running back. But just how much of that is your offensive line, guys like David DeCastro, Kelvin Beachum, Pouncey, how much is it those guys more than it is, him?
It's hard to put like a percentage because naturally you'd want to say like 50-50. They're all working together. They all know where each other's going to be. But DeCastro's been great from when I've seen him this year. He's been great. When he's not spearing Marquise Pouncey in the knee, he's great. Come on, that's like the one. If David DeCastro retired today, that would be the one thing you remember about David DeCastro. And I look at it as, I'm not going to say he's what Faneca was, because that's like, you're basically saying a possible Hall of Famer is being compared to. But DeCastro's pulling ability in the blocking game is almost to that level. And while Pouncey isn't even the best of the Pouncey brothers as a center, he's been solid to good this year. The other parts of the offensive line, it's almost like playing Tetris. You're trying to find the parts that fit. And right now the offensive line's blocking well. It's just there's always that game where they don't block well. And it comes up once every couple of games. It comes up with teams that can split the A gap and get right up the middle and get pressure in the face. The offensive line has problems if you overload the middle. And if Atlanta does that, that could create some problems. Because you never
got the ideal guys to do that too. And Paul Soliai and Rashid Hageman.
If you get upfield, up middle, you will create problems. Because Pouncey can be pushed back.
That's literally all Hageman knows how to do. It's why he's blocked 3 kicks. He lines up right to the right of the right guard, throws him on his butt, and then sticks his big paw in the air, and boom, he blocks the kick. Like, that's all 3 of his kick blocks. Don't get me wrong. Atlanta hadn't blocked a kick in the entire Mike Smith era. So I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that's all it was. It was just he's Hageman, he's just beasting a guy over, and then going like that.
Sometimes that's all you need to do.
When you're 6'6" and you go like that, that's about 10 feet in the air.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with that. But I'd like to see him do that against Ben Roethlisberger as a defensive tackle. Beasting over a David DeCastro, throwing DeCastro on his butt, and then sacking Ben Roethlisberger. That would be amazing to me. Or hitting Le'Veon Bell in the backfield and swallowing him whole like he did at Michigan, like he did when they were the Big Ten.
Yeah.
So I'd be okay with that. Now your right tackle situation. Marcus Gilbert's been okay. Mike Adams has been garbage. Is Gilbert hurt?
It's tough to say because the Steelers, for as long as I can remember, they always have the swing tackle who they bring in sometimes during the game. So it's like he could be hurt, and they just try to hide it by putting Adams in at times. And if he is Gilbert, if he is healthy, he is all right. I'm trying to really call offhand about how many great games he's had. It hasn't been many.
Well, he's average. He's not.
Yeah.
He's not going to lose you games. He's not going to win them, but he's not going to lose you games either.
No, he's just a league average tackle. I mean, you get by with him.
Let's put it this way. For years, we've been wanting a league average left and right tackle in Atlanta. And now that we finally have a league average left tackle as a rookie in Jake Matthews, and an above league average right tackle in Ryan Schrader, we're not complaining. I'll just put it that way.
It's very interesting when you see what an offensive line can do when they're at least all average.
Yeah, like even our center, an undrafted rookie, is average. Like next year, I think Joe Hawley takes that job back, but James Stone has definitely earned a roster spot and turned me from a guy who was like, man, he's awful, he doesn't have any place in the NFL, because that's what I said before. I was like, man, he's just Peter Kahns but smaller, to, you know what, he's actually keepable. He's actually decent. Is he my favorite player? No. Is he going to start over Hawley next year? Probably guaranteed no. But he's depth. And for a team that struggled to find any sort of depth for the longest time, it's nice seeing him on the roster.
Depth along the offensive line is one of the most underrated things in football.
Well, and that's the thing. I think Atlanta's got 4 of their 5 starters for next year as their starting offensive line right now. I think Ryan Schrader is going to leave Lamar Holmes on the bench. I think Jake Matthews is the starting left tackle for the next decade.
I'll still never forget Hard Knocks when the Texans came to visit. I'll never forget, for as long as I live, the image of the music that played when J.J. Watt came walking down the stairs. That might have been one of the greatest Hard Knocks moments ever. And just to hear Mike Tice basically just talk to Bruce Matthews. It was Bruce Matthews, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was talking to him, and he goes, well, we're going to get to see what your son's got today. And then it was just J.J. Watt. I mean, Jake Matthews held his own toward the end.
He did.
And it was really interesting to see, like, all right, you're going to be our future left tackle. Try to block this guy. Let's see what you got. And it was like the Grim Reaper came down the stairs to take a soul, and it was like, all right, fight for your soul.
See, I was kind of shocked they didn't play Duel of the Fates. You know, the Empire music.
That
would have made so much sense.
I mean,
going against, Jake Matthews, and then done just the fake breathing apparatus.
Oh man! I mean, honestly, like, no kidding, that probably was one of the coolest Hard Knocks moments, because they've had some, cool ones and some funny ones, but that was like, I think it was just the way he came down the staircase. Like, there was that one guy to the side who looked at him and just, like, nodded his head, like, okay. And then J.J. Watt just started walking down. It was like, yep, this is about to get real. Like welcome to the NFL before you actually play a game.
Yep.
I'm okay with that, though.
It's good.
Trial by fire has been very good for Jake Matthews, and within about a half season, he's gone from, average to above average in some aspects.
Sometimes you just got to throw a guy into the deep end and just let him see if he can swim. And if he swims, he swims.
The issue was that his ankle was messed up during the middle stretch of the season.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So basically the Atlanta Falcons have gone as their O-line has gone. when their O-line can protect Matt Ryan and let him have a shot at winning and making throws. They went 2-1 in the first 3 games because of it. Then the O-line goes to crap because of all the injuries and everything else. Then about the Detroit game, or actually it was the Detroit game, they go with the current configuration, and it looks okay. And then since the Detroit game, it's gone from just okay to the best offensive line Atlanta has put in front of Matt Ryan since he's been in Atlanta.
Who's your left guard? Is it still Justin Blaylock?
Yeah, it's Justin Blaylock. He hasn't changed in about 7 years.
Play style or body size? Because I think it both applies.
Yeah, it does. I mean, like, he's just that solid, all-around, like, average to above average left tackle. I mean, I'd put him in that, like, 12, or left guard, I should say. I'd put him in that 12 to 14 range for left guards in the NFL. But you know what you're getting, and he's a leader.
Yeah. Sometimes the devil you know is worse or is better than the devil you don't.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it's not like he's bad.
No.
He's not $7 million a year good.
But with the rising salary cap and revenue and all that stuff, eventually, I don't even think what we pay players in about 3 years is going to really matter. I think we're just going to look at it and be like, whatever. The way contracts in sports are going in general is just salary caps rising, TV contracts rising. You're just going to pay guys what you think they're worth, and you're going to still have money to pay anybody else. So I think you just deal with whatever you get.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But, you know, between him and Asamoah signed a super cap-friendly deal for 5 years. So between him and Asamoah, I'm happy with the guards. You know, Stone and Hawley, they're good centers. You know, Matthews and Schrader are good offensive tackles, and I think Holmes is a solid swing kind of guy. Atlanta, at this point, doesn't really need offensive linemen. They just need to draft a couple guys for depth and future. More than, like, they don't need starters. They need depth and future. They need a 4th and a 5th round pick, basically, spent on a guard and a tackle, so they can be like, hey, you guys go out there, learn the scheme, learn how to play football. It's okay if you don't start this year because we don't need you to.
Yeah. Scott, you want to get into some mailbag questions? We got like 7,000 of them.
Yeah, we probably should. So, Justin, do you want to stick around for the mailbag questions?
Stick around. I got nothing to do. I mean, I got basketball in the background, but it's whatever. I don't really care about the game.
It's just the Clippers. They're not
No,
good.
actually, it's a Laker game, so it's even. So it's,
Oh, well, they're definitely not good.
yeah, it's the only game on right now, so I'm just zoning out.
Watching Kobe go for that Michael Jordan points spread.
He's closing in. I think he was out like 70 or something like that before the game, 69 before the game or something. So we'll see.
All right, our first question is from Devontae Hughes. He asks, do you think Nolan will be creative in the latter stretch?
I think he's going to have to be. I don't think there's a way that Atlanta can create pass rush without Nolan saying, you know what, let's run a couple blitzes here. Let's run this guy here, this guy there. Unless he gets his head out of his ass and says, you know what, let's play Jonathan Massaquoi. You know, let's take Troy Bierman off the field and put a guy out there who actually showed he can create pressure as one of 4 guys. So unless, you know, Nolan and Smith get their head out of their ass, he's going to have to. I mean, he's going to have to. And unless they keep, I don't understand why they keep putting Jonathan Babineau at defensive end. He is not a defensive end. Unless they run a 3-man, you know, a 34, that's the only time Jonathan Babineau should be a defensive end on that field. Outside of that, he is a defensive 3 technique, period.
Okay. Sammy Socialite, friend of the podcast, did the Falcons show enough fight last night to make you think they'd be okay in the playoffs?
If the Falcons play like they did in the second half of the game, during the playoffs, during at least the first week of the playoffs, they could win the wild card game against anybody, playing the way that they did that second half. You don't score 30 points in a half, and like that was the potential for the offense that we've all been waiting for this year. 30 points in a half. You don't do that if you're like, oh my God, this team sucks. Oh my God, this team can't play anybody in the playoffs. They're going to be screwed. Like a team that scores 30 points in a half can beat anybody in the playoffs. So, can they win? If Atlanta plays their best game and they get the other team's worst game, Atlanta could win all 4 playoff games.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. You know, it would take a combination of luck and stupidity from other coaches to give Mike Smith the Super Bowl, but
this is the NFL we're talking about. It happens.
This is the NFL. It does happen. Teams do lay eggs, but you're asking for a team to lay an egg and for Atlanta to play basically their absolute best football for the next 7 weeks, which I think they can do it for 3 to get there. I don't know if they can do it when they're in the playoffs to stay there. But I do think Atlanta could win their next 3 games, a wild card game, and then depending on where that divisional game is. If they play Detroit in the divisional game, I could see Atlanta being a team like say they get
Arizona.
Arizona in the first round and Detroit in the second round. Those are 2 great matchups for Atlanta. Those are just absolutely exceptional matchups for Atlanta. So say they get Detroit and Arizona, and then for whatever reason, say, Dallas backs into the playoffs. I think Atlanta could beat all 3 of those teams. That's what they would need the perfect opponents to match up against to end up in the Super Bowl. So it is, I feel like Lloyd Christmas here. I'm saying there's a chance. It's just that big.
I would say, as we saw last night, and I think this has been the case since 2012, when Julio Jones is playing like Julio Jones, the player that we think the Falcons, I won't say are unbeatable because the defense is certainly beatable, but basically their offense, is really, really, really hard to stop. So the bottom line is, if the Falcons make the playoffs, if you can have Julio Jones play like he did, 2 years ago against Seattle and San Francisco, then yeah, they have a chance to be okay in the playoffs and actually upset a team and win some games. But if a team basically is like, we're going to do our best to scheme to stop Julio Jones and make other guys beat us, then, the Falcons really don't stand a chance. So it really just comes down to, can Julio Jones just basically have the sort of playoff run that Larry Fitzgerald had in 2008 when, other than Jerry Rice, it was like the best playoff run any receiver has ever had. And if Julio Jones can do that and have like 150 and average like 150 yards or whatever it was for Larry Fitzgerald, then yeah, the Falcons got a chance. But if not, then no.
As with most sports, playoffs are all about matchups, and the NFL just one game. It's like March Madness.
That's why I listed Arizona and Detroit as 2 ideal opponents, because they destroyed Arizona, who right now has the number 1 seed. And then Detroit.
Sports are weird.
Well, Atlanta played one of their best games against the Detroit Lions. They easily played one of their best games against the Lions in England with an offensive line that was put together that week. So I think if Atlanta played Detroit again, they could beat them. They really could.
Speaking of Detroit, how do you go from, they flip-flopped. It was amazing offense, bad defense, to now offense to great defense. It was just random.
Yeah.
Jim Caldwell. I
Jim
mean, their
called.
offense is still scoring 34 points a game over the past 2 weeks.
It's just weird, like, because I remember like the first 10 weeks of the year was like they were having problems scoring, and it was like it was just.
Yeah,
I've never seen a team go from that bad of a defense to that great of a defense, and that great of an offense to that average of an offense so fast.
All I know is I'd love to play Detroit. I'd love to have Atlanta go. All right, so ideally, Detroit gets the 2 seed, Arizona gets the 1 seed, and then they get someone in the first round, like a Dallas, who I think they match up very well against. And it'd be in the Georgia Dome, where Atlanta has played their best football for the longest time.
Would you take Dallas in the first round, or would you take Philadelphia with Mark Sanchez?
Considering Atlanta's been able to get some interceptions, Philly with Mark Sanchez actually sounds like a better matchup now that you
I
mention
really
it.
have Dallas.
Well, Philly also has a horrible secondary. So you get Mark Sanchez plus a horrible secondary on the other team, turnover-prone quarterback with Atlanta's defense. We all saw how that worked with our good friend Drew Stanton.
Plus, Philadelphia's been pretty average on the road this year, so if you get them at home in Atlanta, could be pretty good.
That would be the ideal. Yeah, so Philly, then going to Detroit, which is a dome, and then going out to the nice, hot, arid temperatures of Arizona. And, yeah, that would be the only way Atlanta could do it. And their defense in the playoffs would look like the best defense they've ever played, going against those 3 quarterbacks. You know, when you get 4 interceptions against Mark Sanchez, people go, oh, yeah, it's just Mark Sanchez. Well, yeah, he shouldn't be starting a playoff game. Then when you get 3 against, Matt Stafford, it's like, oh, well, it's Matt Stafford. Well, yeah, we
Shouldn't be
got bad
starting the playoff.
Stafford. Well, no, we got bad Stafford that day, And then, oh, well, it's, and then say, you get, who's the other team?
Arizona.
They got Drew Stanton. You're like, well, how'd they win? Well, they played someone who their defense could score 6 touchdowns against.
Basically, you would have played 2 T.J. Yates and an Andy Dalton.
Yeah, more or less. More or less. So that's how the Falcons would end up winning and getting to a Super Bowl. So, like I said, avoid Christmas chances.
And don't ask about the Steelers' playoff chances, because I have zero clue how they match up well against.
Yeah.
It just depends on which team shows up. Which Steeler team shows up, that's all that matters.
I can agree. So, Aaron, better scenario, winning division and losing first round, or missing playoffs and better draft position?
I'm not a believer in I think the whole draft position thing is vastly, vastly overrated by people. I think, it doesn't matter where you pick. Good teams pick good players. Just look at the Ravens. So I would say, based off of that alone, winning the division and I guess losing in the first round because the draft position stuff is dumb.
I agree, because I think when you win a division, no matter how crappy you are, if you win a division, there's only you can build up so much momentum just by winning games. And if Atlanta could win 6 of their last 8 games in the season, that's a huge amount of momentum going into the final, or going into next season. And then you add in another draft class, you fix the biggest issues in free agency if you sign a guy like Brandon Graham. I do think that Atlanta would be better off making the playoffs, worrying about signing a good free agency, getting a couple things done. Again, I'm a big fan of winning a division, period, just because it's fun to throw it in the other team's fans' faces. Yeah, the NFC South was a giant crap heap, but at least we were the top turd.
Yeah.
It's fun.
What's the Falcons draft position right now? It's like 21, right?
Atlanta's at 21 right now.
And if they missed the playoffs, would they be like 9th or 10th or something like that?
They'd be 10th if they missed the playoffs.
Okay. Yeah, difference between the 10th and 21st pick is not as big as people think it is. It's really like
They'd be
maybe
9th,
like two
but
guys.
still.
I mean, I can relate to the winning 6-year final 8 games in a season because the Steelers in 06 did that. They were 2-6. 2-6, went 6-2 the rest of the way. Picked Lawrence Timmons, and the next year they made the playoffs. I mean, I like to think that momentum doesn't really exist because things in sports change so dramatically. So it's hard to really gauge how much is momentum and how much is just, in a way, stuff happens. But it's confidence. It's the confidence after you win that many games in that short of a time that you carry with you to next year. Guys start improving. Guys buy in more. I mean, the more you lose, the less guys buy in. And that's basically what it comes down to. The more you win, more guys buy in. So
Yep.
Yep. The Falcons went 6-2 in the second half of '97, and then they went to the Super Bowl the next year. So, coincidence maybe, but we like to think that it had something to do with it.
Well, and here's another thing that I think a lot of fans aren't realizing with the Falcons. After 2012, after they went to the NFC Championship game, they couldn't keep all the players due to the cap space. So they had to let Brent Grimes, they had to let Dante Robinson, they had to let John Abraham, they had to let Tyson Clabo, they had to let all these guys go. When you do that, you're taking away not just veteran leaders, you're taking away some of your most talented players too. And when you take away your best pass rusher and / only pass rusher, it makes it tough. So 2013 hits, they have, 8 draft picks in 2013. They have another 11 draft picks in 2014. They have 3 undrafted free agents from 2013 who are still, 2 of them are still starting, 1 of them is still a reserve, in Bartu, Warlow, and Schrader. So you've got 3 solid, undrafted picks, if you will. You've got James Stone, who's an undrafted free agent. So you've got all that young talent that came in, and that's your new depth. That's your new group of starters and depth and all that. When you get into 2014, after these guys have had a couple of years, 2015, after all these guys have had a couple of years or a year of experience, that's when you start seeing the real results, is players' third, second, those years. And then you add in a whole nother draft class, you add in some other players. Atlanta could be really dangerous in 2015, even with Mike Smith coaching. They just have to realize that they've got to let Croy Bierman walk, and they got to let Osi walk at the end of the year. Their biggest issue right now is pass rushers. If that team has pass rushers, you can get away with subpar coverage linebackers. You can get away, that secondary is good. That secondary is one of the best secondaries I've seen in Atlanta's recent history. So if you can do that, you're fine. All right, next question. Aaron, I think this one was specifically done to troll you. John Emmett asks, who's better, Harry Douglas or Julio Jones?
It's a close one. But I think Julio wins it just by a little bit.
Julio's like the second best receiver on the in the NFL. Harry Douglas is like the 4th best receiver on the Atlanta Falcons. That should tell you everything you need to know.
Pretty much.
So, all right. Next question is from Ayel, because their name is like #RiseUp. It says, was Smitty saying he hopes Julio is going to play Sunday and not mentioning any tests to conclude he's not out for the year? I think what Smitty was saying is they've probably already figured out that it's not anything major, on a Monday press conference for this administration, if it's going to be anything major, the Falcons are going to just straight up tell you, like, hey, this guy's out. We put him on injured reserve starting tomorrow. That's just what they do. So I don't think it's major at all. I do think it's a bruise. Everything I'm reading, everything I've heard from team people has said, it's just a bruise. He probably could have gone back out there had we had time to wrap it. So I think he's going to play Sunday. He might not practice on Wednesday. You know, he might not practice that much on Thursday. But as long as he goes out there and practices on Friday, he should be fine. You know, he's probably going to play this week. He's probably going to play the last 2 weeks of the season. I'm not really worried about if he doesn't play this week, honestly, because I don't think the Steelers have a good secondary in the first place. But I do think that it would be nice to have him. You do need him against the Saints, just because I would love to beat the Saints the way the Panthers beat the Saints.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about Julio right now. So I guess that answers the question.
Yeah.
What's this? Andrew Schauweiler. With Julio pretty much having 2 career games back to back, what does the cap look like for the Falcons that they may sign key defensive free agents and also give Julio a long-term contract?
All right, so the Falcons cap is a very unique situation right now. They've got going into 2015, they've got $30 million in cap space. They've also got $10.1 million already credited for Julio Jones based on that 5th-year option that he's already triggered. They've already said that they're going to do the 5th-year option, which is $10.1 million. If the Falcons decide to re-sign Julio Jones long-term, they could open up a ton of cap space by cutting that first-year cap hit down to, say, $5 or $6 million and putting some of the rest of it towards future years. Now, in future years, Atlanta's got even more cap space because the cap's going to jump up after 2015 to around $150 million, and they've only got around $100 million worth of committed contracts as it sits right now to 2016. But some of those contracts are Sam Baker, Justin Blaylock would have his final year. You've still got Tyson Jackson on that list. You've still got a couple guys who you're like, yeah, these guys are just going to get cut. So I do think that the Falcons have more than enough room to keep them long term. When you've got $40, $50, $60 million in cap room and Julio Jones is a guy that you've got to keep, you just pay him. Just pay him his money. Take that dump truck full of cash and just roll it right up to his house and just dump the money on the front lawn. Like, that's just what you do. Guys like Julio Jones are few and far between. There's 3 of them in the league right now, and that's it. You've got Julio Jones, you've got Calvin Johnson, and then you've got, what's his name, out in, just had the tip of my tongue, Cincy.
AJ Green.
AJ Green. You got those 3 guys. And then maybe Des Bryant. But Des Bryant's kind of a jerk off the field. I'm talking about guys who are good all the way around. And like Larry Fitzgerald 8 years ago. Like, that's what Julio Jones is. So you keep that. And it's very easy to keep him under the books. I will say, as much as we rip on Thomas Dimitroff for giving a lot of these free agents awful contracts, and don't get me wrong, he does, the Falcons have a ton of cap space going into every single season to where they're not like the Saints where they have to cut half their roster every year.
Or the Steelers.
Or the Steelers, yeah. They don't have the let's backload contracts and cut them, 3 years into the deal. Instead, it's like, hey, let's give them a contract that they can actually play out, and then when they, don't really live up to it, cutting them is not as big of a deal. The only real contracts that they got burned on would be the Ray Edwards deal, which I don't understand. Had they known what he was like off the field, they wouldn't have brought him in the first place. I truly believe that one. And then the John Abraham re-extension, they shouldn't have cut him because they had the money to keep him. Those are the only two real contract moves that they've failed with.
Okay. I would say probably the plan before this season was to kind of wait and see on Julio Jones, see if he can make it through the season healthy. But the way he's played this year, even if he doesn't play another game, I certainly think the Falcons would pay him next summer. I think when you throw in the fact that A.J. Green, Michael Crabtree, Demaryius Thomas, Des Bryant, Torrey Smith, and Randall Cobb are all going to get paid this offseason, they'll either get tagged or paid. And then you'll have Julio. He's not going to play next year under the franchise tag. It's basically you're going to see all these guys make these deals that average 12, 13, 14, even 16 million dollars a year, and Julio and Falcons are going to be like, well, all these guys got paid, so I guess we got to pay you now because that's the way it works. So I think the Falcons are probably good financially. You know, they can structure a deal where Julio, I think he's going to count like $10 million next year, and he'll probably count less. So that'll free up space whenever that hits. So you'll probably see the Falcons once those June 1st cuts stick next summer. The Falcons are going to have a ton of cap space that they can roll over into 2016 next year. So I think that's.
All right.
I think Steelers will have like $4 million, and that's if they don't cut anybody.
That's high for them.
That is high for them. That's actually, I think, the most we've had in like 3 years, 4 years. It's so weird. We might actually get someone kind of. No, we're not going to get anyone. Never mind.
Oh, hey, we can pay our rookies without cutting everybody.
Pretty much. Like, I think some of the talk right now is like cutting Mike Mitchell. So.
Yeah, but he sucks. So.
He's. Oh God, he's terrible. Like some of the other talk was like cutting Polamalu, but.
I would do that. I would do that in a heartbeat. He's not.
It's funny. Like I would do that. I would do that, but I understand why they wouldn't. Same with like
the best player in your defense.
So well, I think it's because of like the whole, like cutting Lamar Woodley was one thing, which was totally justified. I even wrote about it last year during the middle of last season. Like that's one guy we got to cut right there. But I think cutting guys like Polamalu and Heath Miller would be sending the Steelers front office is really loyal to guys, really loyal to those veterans who embody the quote unquote Steelers culture. So I think cutting Troy and cutting Heath is not something they do, but I would agree with them doing it, but I also agree with them not doing it. It's a slippery thing, and we're just not gonna have money to pay free agents again, so that'll be fun.
Well, at least you're used to it.
Yeah, I mean, kind of happened with Emmanuel Sanders, and I think the Patriots are still pissed about that.
All right. One more question from. Actually, we've got a bunch more questions. But next question, DSizzle78, Dustin Smith, says, do you think a new coach can turn this defense around? It's hapless. 6 years and no change. Got to be Dimitroff, right? I'm over it. That's what he said, Aaron.
Yeah. I think a new coach can turn. I don't think the Falcons can suddenly go from where they are now at the bottom of the league to top 10 next year, but I do think they can, jump into the middle portion of the league with some personnel upgrades. I think that's the main thing. Obviously, they do need to be better coached on defense, but it's not just simply, we're going to get a coach and he's going to install a new scheme and suddenly everything's going to work. Because I remember the Falcons trying to do that almost a decade ago. In 2001, they were one of the worst defenses in the NFL. Then they hired Wade Phillips in 2002. He installed the 3-4. And they were one of the better bend but don't break defenses in the league. I think they were top 5 scoring defense, but like bottom 10 total defense. And then they basically sat on their hands and didn't make any moves the following offseason, and then they went right back to being a terrible defense. And I think you kind of see that with the Saints this year. it's just not scheme that's going to fix the Falcons defense. So you get a new coach, new scheme, and you invest in your pass rush, and you make some upgrades in at linebacker, you make some upgrades in the secondary. Yeah, I think this defense can be turned around.
I have a question for you guys. Steven Jackson, is he back next year?
No.
He's on the list, but I don't think he comes back next year.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I was just looking at the cap savings. If you cut him before June 1st, I could.
It's the same either way. It's the final year of his contract.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, I just see that now. Yeah.
I would be surprised if Steven Jackson is back next year. I mean, I think him and Sam Baker are probably the two guys that I would say, yeah, it's pretty much a lot that they're not going to be Falcons next year.
Yeah, basically. Those two guys in a heartbeat, gone.
Devin Hester too, or is he staying?
Oh no, that's been good.
He's going to be good.
All right.
Unless we hire Jay Cutler as our coach, because Jay Cutler hates Devin Hester, but I don't think that's going to happen. So
this isn't Madden.
Exactly. It's not Madden. Jay Cutler's not going to be anywhere near the Falcons.
Or a coaching staff in the next 20 years.
Yeah, basically.
All right. Tony B asks, what are both of your ideal scenarios for a head coach and staff next year if Smith is let go?
Wait, hold on. I do want to just say one thing. I don't think it's 100% Dimitrov, because I think if you played the right guys in the right spots, like I've been saying all year, and you played Massaquoi, you probably would have decent defense. If you played Goodman and Massaquoi as your starting defensive ends, they'd play a lot better. I'm not saying the defense would be amazing, but Atlanta's got the tools to have at least a 20 to 25 range defense instead of a 32 ranked defense.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, but yeah, get some pass rushers. Anyway, ideal scenario for head coach and staff next year if Smith's let go. I mean, just someone who's going to use the players to their strengths. I don't care what their name is. Because I can throw a name out there. I can throw Adam Gase out there. I can throw Hugh Jackson out there. I can throw Josh McDaniels out there as offensive guys. You can say Rex Ryan or, any of these guys as defensive guys. But it's pointless to worry about the name if the coach themselves don't care about, hey, just get me a collection of talent, I'll turn them into a well-schemed, well-coached team. If I was a head coach, I would just say, hey, get me a collection of talent, I'll make it work. I'll figure out where these guys play best, what their roles are the best, and then I'll make it work. And if it's like, hey, I need a deep safety, hey, I kind of need this, I kind of need that, you give a vague idea, but you don't say, oh, hey, get me a guy who's a pass rush specialist from a 5 technique. That's all I need. Like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, I understand everybody wants a J.J. Watt, but there's one of them. So, ideally, just give me a head coach that understands, hey, this guy works best here. This guy works best here. Julio Jones, you can run any route with him in the offense, so design him to run every single route throughout the game. Hey, Roddy White's not great deep anymore, so let's have him as a big slot guy. Let's have him as an underneath kind of guy. Let's have him as a mid-range kind of guy. Oh, hey, we need a tight end because Toilolo sucks. That's what you have to do. So, just give me a guy who wants to use the talent in their best possible spot and where they win. And I don't care about what his name is. Hell, if that guy happens to be Mike Smith and he gets his head out of his ass, that's fine too. I'd like to see Mike Smith finish what he started. Bring the Falcons to relevance, step 1. Step 2, break the back-to-back winning season bullshit. Step 3, win a Super Bowl. Did the first 2.
Yeah. I would say, Tony, my ideal scenario, if I could be a fly on the wall in the interview for the next head coach, I would love that person. And I don't know who it is, but this is the ideal scenario in my head. That guy's going to tell Arthur Blank, we're going to establish an identity. We're going to be this sort of team. And when you open your new stadium in 2017, week one, when we play that first game, or week two, when we play that first game in the Coca-Cola Dome, or whatever it's going to be called, this is the team that we're going to be. And we're going to be, whether it's a finesse team like the Colts of Peyton Manning era, that's going to be this team that's going to score 40 points a game and be fast and physical and be the greatest show on turf, be a dome team. Or they're going to be this physical, grinded out team like the 49ers or the Seahawks, and we're just going to maul dudes and we're going to smash dudes in the dirt. Whatever the case may be, I don't really care what the identity is, but pick one and stick to it. Don't be like what Smith and Dimitrov did, which was we're going to be a physical team, and then all of a sudden 3 years into it, be like, oh no, we're just going to go out and be a finesse team, but we don't really know how to be a finesse team. So we just kind of be twisting in the wind, and then it kind of all fall apart, which is, I think, explains a lot of what the current scenario is in Atlanta. So that's my ideal scenario. Who that coach is, I don't know, but that's what I would like to hear.
Like I said, if Mike Smith gets his head out of his ass and does that tomorrow, again, I'd like to see him finish what he starts. Hey, we want to be a power running team with exceptional passing and an offensive line that's gritty and disgusting and Mike Tice stamped. I think that's why the offensive line is doing well, is because I think Mike Tice has full control. It's playing like he's got full control. I think that was the issue in Chicago. He didn't have full control of the offensive line. So, let him have control. Let him pick his offensive line. Give him a couple picks toward the end of the draft. Say, hey, Mike, you got a 6th and a 7th rounder. What do you want? And just go with that.
Okay. Isosceles Kramer asks, how badly do we need to draft a defensive tackle? Just drafting Rashid makes it harder to do depending on the new front office's view on him.
All right, so saying you cut Tyson Jackson, and Corey Peters says, you know what, peace out, guys, I'm done. I'm going to head out. You still have Paul Soliai. You still have Jonathan Babineau. You still have Rashid Hageman on the roster. Honestly, I don't think you need a defensive tackle early. And worst case scenario, I think you can move Malachi Goodman to a 3-technique rotation with Babineau and have Hageman and Soliai at a 1-technique if you decide to stick with the 4-man line. If you do the 3-man front, you've got Goodman, Soliai, Babineau, Hageman. You still don't really need an interior lineman. You need, defensive ends, 34 defensive ends, as opposed to 34, or as opposed to 43 defensive tackles. So you kind of just try and see if you take one in the mid-rounds in that case. You just don't worry too much about, hey, who is the best possible mid-round guy. The problem Atlanta has right now is they're running a 4-man front with 3-man personnel. So, again, that goes back to identity. If the identity was, hey, we're going to play a stupid defense and hope that it works, well, they're playing a stupid defense and it's not working. If the identity is, hey, we want to have guys who can fit multiple fronts and attack from different angles and do this and do that and do a bunch of different things well, let's actually draft for that. So if you want to have a hybrid defense, draft for roles as opposed to, hey, we're going to take this guy or that guy for this one specific thing he does. Take a guy who can play a 5-technique or a 3-technique. Take a guy who can play outside linebacker or put his hand in the dirt and get after the passer. Take a guy who can do multiple things well. Take a guy who can drop back into coverage or get after the passer like a Bud Dupree. That's the big issue Atlanta has right now. So do they need a defensive tackle? Probably not. Do they need defensive ends if they go to a 3-4? Sure.
I would say I think defensive tackle is a need. I don't know if it's a priority need right now because I think you can probably, throw a rotation out there and get by for a year or two. But, even if Jackson is gone, even if Peters leaves, I don't think Hageman's ready to be a starter. I think he could be a rotational guy. I think Babineau is a rotational guy at this point. I think Soliai really is a rotational guy. So you don't have that one guy that I think next year is going to be that every down, 3-down player that's going to be a dominant force. And so if that guy's available in the draft, first round, second round, whatever, then pick him up. I don't see any problem with doing that. But, obviously I think the Falcons have probably bigger fish to fry, getting an inside linebacker, getting an edge rusher, improving their depth at the offensive skill positions, getting a starting tight end. Those things are probably bigger priorities. But, if a good defensive tackle is available, if a Fletcher Cox, a Muhammad Wilkerson type of player is available, by all means take him.
Let's put it this way. If they can get Nick Fairley for a price that's not out of this world, you get him. If they can get Donkey Kong Sue for a price that's not out of this world, you get him. If they can get Dan Williams from Arizona for a price that's not stupid, you do it. But, if they can somehow keep Corey Peters from leaving by cutting, say, Tyson Jackson and giving Corey the same contract they gave Tyson Jackson, I'm sure they would do that in a heartbeat. That's what he wanted last year. He wanted that same contract last year. He would have signed it in a heartbeat. So if that's what it takes to keep Corey Peters, you do that. And then you play your money. But at least if you're playing your money and you've got Soliai and Peters out there, you've got the best pairing you've got. And you rotate Hageman and Babineau in at defensive tackle, that's a better-looking rotation than the stupidity they're throwing out there right now.
Asasilis Kramer and FSU Brad have similar questions, so we'll combine them. Asasilis Kramer asks, though not ideal, thoughts on Schrader going forward at right tackle, have bigger needs on the defensive side of the ball. And FSU Brad asks, how do you feel about Schrader as the long-term option at right tackle? We just leave center to shore up. So, Scott, what do you think about Schrader?
Schrader is a skinny Tyson Clabo. And by skinny, I mean 307 pounds as opposed to 340 pounds. I think Ryan Schrader is a long-term starter who needs to get a contract stating that after his current one expires. I think center doesn't need shoring up when you've got Joe Hawley and James Stone there. Sounds like to me you've got a starter, because Hawley's only 26. So you've got a starter there for another 4 years, 5 years minimum. And then when he's done, you've got James Stone, who, worst case scenario, he's a backup for 3 or 4 years and starts elsewhere. And then if Hawley gets injured again, or Hawley gets like a career ender type deal, then you have Stone as your starter after that. But I don't think center is a huge need. I don't think right tackle is a need. Because even if Schrader isn't viewed by the team as that guy of the future, you've still got Lamar Holmes, who, just from my perspective, looked like a solid pass blocker this past year. And worst case scenario, I think you have Lamar Holmes move to left guard and learn how to play it from Justin Blaylock for a year before you re-sign him and have him try it out as a starter. So, I think... Yeah, Aaron. Hey, that's a thought, isn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. We'll see. I've been a Schrader fan since we got him. I think he has upside. I'm not gonna sit here and say that he's proven himself to be a long-term fixture yet. I still want to see him continue to grow in terms of his technique-wise. But obviously, I do think, based off of his play so far this year, and assuming he doesn't completely lay eggs these last 3 games, which I don't, maybe Cameron Jordan somehow becomes Cameron Jordan again and makes him look bad, but that doesn't look like it's going to be the case. But, yeah, if he finish out the season pretty well, and continues to show growth next year, I think he certainly has the opportunity to compete and win the job next year. And if he has another good season, then certainly I would be much more confident that he's the long-term guy. Yeah, I think if I was probably the Falcons GM, I'd probably look at signing a veteran swing tackle this offseason. The guy that I imagine is someone like Michael Roos. If his broken leg is healed, that you can kind of get relatively cheap and say, hey, Michael Roos, you want to play one more year in the NFL? How about you come to Atlanta and push these young guys? And if they struggle or get hurt, then we can plug in Michael Roos at right tackle, and maybe teach Jake Matthews a few things. That would be pretty cool. But that's the ideal scenario. It probably wouldn't happen, but
that would be worth $2 million to me for a year too. Like Michael Roos is a swing tackle, even if Schrader's starting. Schrader and Matthews are starting, and Holmes is the backup. Roos is that like teacher swing tackle. I'd be down with that. I like that idea.
Yeah.
So
all right.
I do agree with you.
Tyler T. Classard asks, I'd like to hear what Willie Mo offers that Lowry and Ishmael don't. Maybe I'm missing something, but I don't find them wildly different other than Mo's name and character. I would say to Tyler, I think, to summarize it, if you have access to NFL Game Rewind, go back and watch the Week 2 game on Monday night against the Broncos, second quarter, 2-minute warning play. Demaryius Thomas destroyed Dante Robinson on a double move, and William Moore ran 25 yards, roughly or so, to basically break up a touchdown. And I would say that's what Willie Mo offers that Lowry and Ishmael don't. I don't see either Lowry or Ishmael making that play. And, so that's it.
That's fair, but Mo has to be on the field. That's kind of my biggest issue with William Moore, is just how often he is on the field isn't enough to be like, hey, oh my God, this guy's amazing, when he's getting injured every year. It feels like, I mean, William Moore has played 100% of the snaps twice in his career, maybe once in his career. Like, feels like he's injured every single season he started. So well, I don't see it as like, oh my God, William Moore is this absolute beast. You can't get by without him, because Atlanta's already been getting by without him for at least a couple games every year, because he's constantly injured.
That's fair.
I like William Moore, but when a guy's constantly injured like that, it forces guys like Kamal Ishmael to step up, like Dwight Lowry to step up. If you would have told me Kamal Ishmael would come in and look this good as a 7th-round rookie, let's put it this way. Before the draft, I hadn't heard of Kamal Ishmael. Before the Falcons took him, I literally had not heard of him. I had to go back, watch film, and be like, who the hell is this guy? So when I went back and did that, I was like, all right, so he's good. He's like a box safety is what I saw. A guy who doesn't miss tackles, which he's missed 8 all year. So that alone is an improvement from last year when you had Thomas Deku missing 15, 16 tackles. He's a guy that, he gives up a big play here or there. I was okay with the pick. I do think that William Moore is a bit overrated because he's constantly injured. So I'm with you, Tyler. I'm not seeing anything that he offers that those two don't. But if William Moore could stay healthy and play linebacker, I'd have him play there for the rest of the season, because Atlanta needs a coverage linebacker who can actually do something.
Well, I think Justin can weigh in on this. He's a safety. As Justin knows with Troy Polamalu, safeties get hurt. Eric Berry is constantly hurt. The very nature of the safety position is the most injury-prone position on the field. So I wouldn't necessarily hold it against the safety that he gets hurt as a reason why he's overrated. Because I think then you could say, well, Bob Sanders is overrated. Troy Polamalu is overrated.
Right.
Eric Berry's overrated.
Bob Sanders was overrated, dude. Bob Sanders was ridiculously overrated.
Okay, well, he won the Colts a Super Bowl, so.
He was overrated, but I don't think he was overrated in terms of talent. I think he was overrated in terms of people put him up on such a high pedestal. Like, there was a time where people thought he was the best safety in the game. And he was never the best safety in the game, but he was one of the top ones. And safeties think about it in terms of pure, like, human physics. It's a man running downhill at another man who's running uphill, basically, and they're colliding. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be concussions. There's going to be broken bones, torn tendons, et cetera, et cetera. It's just the nature. Football, I mean, by its very nature, football is a violent game. It's just that safeties have it worse than others because of the fact that they're the ones also, not only they're delivering the hits, they're taking them. I mean, they're running downhill and they're hitting another man at top speed, and the force of that collision is stopping their own body as well. Creates a whiplash. And I think that the injuries to safeties are just something that are just going to happen. You can't determine which safety is going to stay healthy, which safety is going to get injured. There's just freak injuries, freak occurrences, freak collisions. And it's happened to everyone. Polamalu, Barry, Sanders. It happened to Ed Reed once or twice. It's just the nature of the safety position. I mean, Sean Taylor was injured a couple times in his career, and it's just how it is. I mean, safeties, I'm not going to say they're the most critical part of the defense, because every defense varies on which position is more critical. It's just that I think the better safety tandem or safety that you have, the better chance you have of doing something on defense. And especially combined with the fact that they stay healthy. It's just, you never know.
Yeah. I agree with that. I wouldn't knock Willie Moore because of durability. It is a concern, certainly. I think you can't go forward if you're the Falcons expecting Willie Moore to play 16 games at any point the rest of his career. I think you always have to kind of assume if we can get 12 games from William Moore, that's a successful season. But I wouldn't sit there and say, he's not good or he's overrated because he gets hurt a lot. I would still take 8 games from William Moore over 16 games from any of the other Falcons safeties.
I don't know. I'd rather. I'm not saying William Moore's bad. I'm just saying I'm with Tyler on this where I don't see it's a huge. I don't see the huge gap in talent that you're seeing right now.
Okay.
Like, we're getting really good safety play out of Ishmael, out of Lowery. We're getting average safety play out of Desmond Southward, and it makes him look awful in comparison. But we're getting average safety play for the few snaps that Southward does see the field. So I'm honestly not too worried about the position.
Okay. We'll see what next year has to say. Last question. Jesse Lalamindre. What Christmas miracle do you want the Falcons to perform this year?
I would like for Mike Smith to get his head out of his ass, play players where they win, and win as many games as possible. If it's getting to the second round of the playoffs and losing by a field goal, I'd be okay with that. Do I think Mike Smith should be fired if he does that? No. Yeah, no, hot take. But at this point, I'd like to see Mike Smith save his job with a Super Bowl win. That would be the Christmas miracle I'm hoping for.
Okay.
Win a Super Bowl, come back next year, win another one.
All right. My Christmas miracle is Harry Douglas becoming a good receiver.
Sounds like we have similar goals.
Yeah. So probably impossible, but that's why it's a Christmas miracle. All right.
I think mine for the Steelers would be just to get healthy and stay healthy for the rest of the year. That's all I want. Health is the big deal.
I agree. I completely agree.
It's amazing how many team seasons. Obviously, it's an obvious fact and statement, but it's amazing how many team seasons are just ruined for injuries. Just every year, and it's not just football. It's basketball, baseball, hockey, et cetera, et cetera. It's just, unfortunately, injuries are just one of the things you can't avoid.
Trust me, we know all too well. The Falcons have a whole starting offensive line on injured reserve. As in, like, this line could go play for the Raiders and be instant starters. Let me just name it. Sam Baker, Joe Hawley, Lamar Holmes, Mike Johnson, and Peter Collins.
Probably starters on the Raiders.
That entire line could start on the Raiders and be better than what they have.
How about those Raiders, though? 2 wins now.
It's nice to see.
Last win came at a price, though. Dropped from 1st to 5th in the draft, but that's inconsequential at this point.
To be fair, they've got their quarterback, so it's probably for the best.
Yeah, as long as you identify your quarterback, although it could get interesting, depending on if someone else comes in to coach and they want their quote-unquote own guy, which would suck for Derek Carr because he doesn't deserve that.
Trade him to the Bucks.
I think the Bucks would do that too. I don't know what the Bucks would give them, but they would so do that.
Like, Oakland trades you Derek Carr and the number 5 overall for your number 1 overall. Trade down to 5, pick up Leonard Williams, piss off everybody in the NFC South because you've got a pair of nasty defensive tackles to destroy the guards.
I love Leonard Williams.
Yeah.
I watch him every Saturday. I love that dude.
That'd probably be the best fit for for that whole situation.
Speaking of the draft, this is going to be an interesting draft because whoever ends up number 1, if they need a quarterback, it's going to be Mariota. But the real telling point is going to be where does Winston go and how heavily weighted is his off-field stuff.
Hot take, Winston goes number 1 overall.
You think so?
I think a team's going to be like, man, this kid's just like Cam Newton.
Ooh.
He's a leader. He just has to have a coach put their foot up his ass. Because that's what Cam Newton needed.
Yeah. I mean,
Ron Rivera put his foot up his ass, and since then he's been a good kid. He's still kind of an arrogant, cocky D-bag, but, I mean, that's a quarterback for you.
Quarterback's one of the weirdest positions, too, because in losses they get all the blame, in wins they get all the credit, and there's no middle ground. I mean, there's middle ground sometimes, but most of the time there's no middle ground whatsoever.
Well, and you got to look at it this way, too. Quarterbacks also have personalities ranging from the robots like Joe Flacco and Matt Ryan and Peyton Manning, who's a robot with a southern accent, to the colorful characters like Brett Favre and Cam Newton and,
Yep.
you know, just like the arrogant ones who wear the NBA-style outfits that make it look like they lost a bet with somebody.
Oh, God, yeah. The NBA outfits are out of control. Out of control.
I honestly think it is a bet that they've all made with each other and said who can wear the goofiest shit and not look like the biggest tool.
I think it's an inside bet among millionaires. Because even actors and actresses do it. They wear the most ridiculous crap that is not even fashion.
I agree. I think they are legitimately doing it just to look stupid.
Illuminati.
Be like, I'm a millionaire. Eat it, public.
Yeah. Well, guys, we've had a 2-hour show. I think we've given people more than enough to marinate on, I guess.
That's what happens when I wake up from a nap with some energy. Um, anyway, you can find me at Scott Karasik on Twitter or at Draft Falcons. You can find Aaron at FalcFans. You can find the show at Falcons PFC. Thanks again to Justin for coming on. He is at Fly by Night, and night is spelled Knite. Have a good week, everybody, and hopefully the Falcons win.